We're going to have an orderly transition to a better health care system that makes affordable, high-quality health insurance available for every American.
It's really a cruel bill that the Republicans have put forth, and it will increase the number of uninsured in our country.
Vice President Pence making the case in Kentucky Saturday for the GOP's new health care plan, while House Democratic leader Nancy Pelosi defends the Obamacare law she worked so hard to pass. And it's time now for our Sunday group. Jason Riley from the Wall Street Journal, Fox News political analyst and columnist for The Hill, Juan Williams, Julie Pace, who covers the White House for the Associated Press, and Michael Needham, head of the conservative think tank Heritage Action for America. Well, Michael, you say that there's no significant difference between Obamacare and the repeal and replace plan. You were one of the leaders of outside groups who met with President Trump at the White House this week. Did you tell him that?
We had a great meeting. I thought that the president was open to feedback. I think that what Gary Cohn said earlier about them looking for improvements was absolutely the case. It was productive, and we moved the ball forward. The problem is that the spirit that the president was bringing of openness to improvement has not been the spirit that Capitol Hill, the congressional leadership, has bought with their binary choice, either take it or leave it approach. The fundamental problem is that this bill keeps the architecture of Obamacare in place. Obamacare has a whole series of regulations that drive up the cost of buying health insurance. Many of those regulations stay in place. Because these regulations drive up the cost of health insurance, to keep people in buying health insurance, Obamacare had an individual mandate, which would penalize people for not buying health insurance. This bill gets rid of the individual mandate and replaces it with a mandate on insurers of a 30% tax to try to have continuous coverage. And because you've now driven up the cost of health insurance and you're requiring people or incentivizing people to buy these overly expensive plans that they don't want to purchase, you then have a large subsidy. Obamacare had a large subsidy that's replaced with a different form of subsidy. This bill keeps the architecture of Obamacare in place, and that's why it needs to be improved, and it needs to be improved a lot if we're going to make it great.
Well, I want to pick up on that because while some liberals, we just heard Nancy Pelosi complaining bitterly, there are others who are claiming victory, and exactly on Michael's point, they say that this bill maintains the basic structure, architecture of Obamacare in the sense that there will continue to be government regulation of the health insurance industry, in the fact that even after it is scaled back, that Medicaid there will actually be more people under Medicaid than were before Obamacare. So they say, in effect, that Obama has won.
Well, I think former President Obama has won in the terms that you now have Republicans and Democrats, liberals and conservatives, saying the government has an important role to play here. But I would object to this way of thinking about the question, Chris, in this regard. When you say Obamacare light, it suggests, oh, this is just a little different than Obamacare, no big deal. I think it is a big deal from the left's perspective because you have fewer people insured. The whole point of the deal was to increase the number of people who have health insurance in America. 20 million gained health insurance from Obamacare. This would decrease the number of people who have health insurance. It would drive up the cost of health insurance, especially, and I find this ironic, for older, low-income voters, many of whom, especially white lower-income voters, were Trump supporters. Those people are going to be hurt by this plan. You have the AMA, the American Medical Association, the nurses, the hospitals, all of them saying this doesn't work, this doesn't improve health care for Americans.
We ask you for questions for the panel, and we got a bunch from people who are upset about the disarray that we're seeing, and we've seen on this show, about repealing Obamacare. Someone named Common Sense, I think I'm going to take that name, tweets this for Republican leaders. One, this is for Republicans. What have you been doing since it was passed back in 2010? Two, why weren't you ready to go on day one for President Trump? Jason, how do you answer Common Sense?
Well, one problem is that the Democrats have been slow walking a lot of the nominees that Trump has put forward. So he hasn't had a lot of time to work with his team in place. And now that he does have his team in place, I think things are moving along. But Chris, conservatives have to decide whether they're going to do what is achievable and pragmatic here, or whether they're going to make the perfect the enemy of the good here. And the reality here is that a lot of the stuff in this bill Paul Ryan doesn't like. You know, he doesn't like the Medicaid expansion. He doesn't like using tax credits instead of tax deductions. And if he were building a system from scratch, they wouldn't be in there. But he's not building a system from scratch. He's building a system from Obamacare. And he wants to move gradually. He wants to move pragmatically. He wants to move in a way that this can get through both chambers of Congress. The Republicans don't have a lot of wiggle room. They can only afford to lose about 12 people, maybe, in the House. In the Senate, the margin is much narrower there, too. So he's got, and a clean bill is very unlikely to get through the Senate. Everyone knows that.
Michael?
It's just a very, very unfair way to frame this issue. You have one chance on a 51-vote Republican threshold to get a bill through. And what conservatives are saying is take the architecture of Obamacare, do that on the 51-vote threshold, party line vote, and then do the rest when you need to get Democrats. What they're proposing going through is the exact opposite. You do the rest now with 51 votes, and then we're going to magically get 60 votes, 8 Democrats, to say, hey, now that you passed your bill that keeps that architecture in place, we're going to join you to tear down the architecture.
Trump didn't run on doing the rest later. He didn't run on simply repeal. He ran on repeal and replace.
And that's what we should do.
And that's why he is backing Congressman Ryan right now, the House Speaker, because he knows that they will own health care. They will own every horror story coming out of this. You're exactly right. Losing their coverage. And even Trump tweeted this will be a disaster in 2018.
Jason,
if we don't get this right.
If Republicans leave the architecture of Obamacare in place, and if we have death spirals and premiums going up under Ryan Care, what do you think the 2020 election is going to look like? What's the 2024 election going to look like? What's it going to look like when a Democrat president puts in single-payer health insurance? That's why we need to do this right. We need to do it right now. Or else it's going to be everyone who doesn't want to run through the finish lines.
I want to switch to another topic in the time we have left in this segment, and I want to bring you in, Julie. And I want to ask you about the good jobs report that we got for last month. How much credit do you think President Trump, you heard Gary Cohn say the CEOs are in, they're excited, they're going to start investing and hiring. How much credit do you think President Trump legitimately deserves for the good jobs numbers? And Gary had to kind of, as you expect anybody in the White House to do, duck on the question of the Fed. How worried are they about the Fed and a series of rate hikes over the next few months and whether that could turn the economy around?
Well, I think when you look at the jobs numbers, there are two pieces of this. One, the U.S. economy is massive and it doesn't turn on a dime. So a lot of what you're seeing in the jobs numbers is part of patterns and trend lines that we saw last year under President Obama. At the same time, I think it's undeniable that there is a level of confidence on Wall Street among some of these executives that had been meeting with the president lately that may be contributing to this.
Business confidence numbers are up.
They are up. That confidence, though, is based in part on passing a repeal and replace of Obamacare, passing a big tax reform overhaul. And so if those packages don't get through this year, you may see that confidence start to decline a bit. So there is a lot of pressure on the White House to make good on those promises. And when it comes to the Fed rate hike, there is some nervousness. They are limited in what they can say publicly, obviously, because the Fed is independent. But there is some nervousness that if you have growth start to roll back and you are in the middle of a really tough Obamacare debate and tax reform gets pushed off longer, then we're suddenly looking at a much different economic picture than what they feel like they have walked into right now.
And in 30 seconds, I want to take you back to the whole Obamacare thing. The big news this week is that the Congressional Budget Office is going to come out with its score, and the expectation is it's going to say that millions of people will lose. Now, maybe it's accurate, maybe it isn't, but it's going to be out there, will lose coverage under repeal and replace. How scared are they about that?
Well, I think the preemptive spinning that you're seeing of numbers that aren't even out yet tell you everything that you need to know. They know that there is going to be some number out there, perhaps up to 15 million, we don't know exactly, of people who will lose coverage. And even if they are discrediting that number, that is going to be a pretty powerful figure for opponents, both on the left and the right, to wield against this plan.
All right, we have to take a break here, panel.